They say you can always tell when a predator enters the room. The air itself remembers how to fear. The Galactic Academy's training hall was a place of quiet precision until the new transfer cadet arrived. His name was Karn, a member of a predator species born on a world where only the strongest survived. The moment he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every student of every species felt an ancient instinct awaken somewhere deep in their brainstems, a whisper from evolutionary memory that screamed a single word: run. A hunter had entered the room. Karn was tall and formidable, his slate-blue skin marked with the faint ridges of natural armor that had protected his ancestors through countless generations of apex dominance. Every movement was efficient, balanced, and lethal. His eyes swept across the room, cataloging weaknesses the way his kind once tracked prey across the killing plains of his homeworld. No one met his gaze for long, no one except the human, Leon Arden. The man sat quietly in the third row, watching, neither intimidated nor defiant, just watching. The lecture resumed, hollow and tense. The instructor's voice wavered as she attempted to continue the session on interspecies conflict resolution, a topic that suddenly felt bitterly ironic. Karn stood motionless near the back, his presence a gravitational force that bent the room's attention toward him whether anyone wanted to look or not. Then something primal urged him to test the room. From beneath his skin, thin bioluminescent lines ignited, spreading across his frame in ancient hunting patterns, the same patterns his ancestors had used to paralyze entire herds before the killing strike. The air began to vibrate. Low-frequency pulses, inaudible but deeply, viscerally felt, rolled through the hall in waves. They hit the students' nervous systems like invisible claws dragging across exposed nerves. Breathing became difficult. Heartbeats quickened, then stuttered. One cadet collapsed, their chair clattering against the floor. Another sobbed quietly, curled into themselves. A third vomited. The predator watched the chaos with cold detachment, his expression unreadable, assessing the data of their terror with clinical precision. Until he noticed that Leon hadn't moved. The human simply rose from his chair, unhurried, every motion deliberate and controlled. He didn't speak, didn't reach for a weapon or call for help. He just stood, his eyes meeting Karn's across the distance, and in that gaze was something the predator had never encountered before. Karn froze. His instincts, trained over generations to detect threats, faltered. What stood before him wasn't prey. The posture was all wrong, the chemical markers absent. But it wasn't a rival either. Rivals displayed, postured, threatened. This was something else entirely. Something that had already met fear and passed through it like walking through smoke. The bioluminescent patterns across Karn's skin dimmed. The vibrations faded into silence. He sat down without a word, and for the first time in his life, he looked away first. The instructor, pale and shaken, dismissed the class early. Students fled. Medical personnel arrived to tend to those who had collapsed. And through it all, Leon simply gathered his materials and left, his heartbeat already returning to baseline. Later, when the incident was analyzed, the data revealed something remarkable. The human had experienced the same surge of stress hormones as everyone else: cortisol, adrenaline, all the biochemical markers of acute threat response. But his behavior had remained calm, total control under physiological duress. It wasn't the absence of fear, it was mastery of it. Karn, raised in a culture where strength meant domination and silence meant weakness, couldn't forget that stillness. He began to understand that restraint could be a greater force than aggression, that the ability to act and the wisdom not to were two halves of true power. The next day he entered the hall again. No one breathed as he passed until he sat 2 rows ahead of Leon, not beside him, not challenging him, just near. It wasn't surrender, it was recognition. The event soon became a case study at the academy. Analysts called it the response without violence. Students from 100 worlds watched the recording of that single, quiet moment, one human rising as the rest cowered. There was no weapon, no command, no display of power, only the simple, unshakable decision to stand. At the end of the briefing, a single line appeared beneath the footage. The human stood not for heroism, but because inaction was alien to him. In the years that followed, Karn would rise to command fleets, his tactical brilliance legendary across 3 sectors. But he would always remember the day he learned his most important lesson, not from a superior officer, not from a battlefield, but from a quiet man who simply refused to kneel. On graduation day, as they stood together on the academy steps, Karn finally asked the question that had haunted him. "What were you thinking when you stood?" Leon was quiet for a long moment, watching the twin suns set over the training grounds. "That if I was going to be afraid," he said finally, "I would do it standing up." Karn understood then. Courage was not the absence of fear, but what one chose to do while drowning in it. Strength was not in the capacity to harm, but in the discipline to withhold that capacity. And power, true power, was measured not by what you could take from others, but by what you could give to yourself. Dignity, even in terror. Choice, even when instinct screamed otherwise. For in the end, all civilization is built not on the strength to conquer, but on the strength to restrain. Not on the power to strike, but on the wisdom to stay one's hand. The greatest victory is not over enemies without, but over the primal darkness within, the ancient voice that whispers we are nothing more than beasts with clever tongues. And perhaps that is what makes us human. Not that we never feel the call of violence, but that we can hear it clearly and still choose peace.